Hi, everyone. Welcome to ClearDATA's webinar about innovating safely in the cloud, where we'll talk about how ClearDATA Comply can help drive compliance on top of the public cloud. My name is Connor Colgan. I'm product manager here at ClearDATA, and I'm happy to have everyone join. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll have Q&A time at the end, so I'll be sure to address any questions that folks have. So why don't we go ahead and get started? A quick introduction to ClearDATA. Where we focus on is enabling healthcare and life science organizations to innovate more rapidly in the cloud. We can help customers adopt cloud services quicker through taking our healthcare expertise and merging that with our cloud expertise. We look at what are the requirements from the healthcare perspective and how can those turn into technical controls that are mapped to cloud services. We focus on a number of healthcare standards, including HIPAA, GDPR, GXP, as well as following industry standards like NIST and ISO. ClearDATA is a HITRUST certified organization, so we follow the HITRUST CSF framework when we go out and build these technical controls. We are partnered with the premier public cloud vendors, including AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. And we work very closely with system integrators like Perficient, PwC, and Accenture. Now, how we help you accelerate your journey into the cloud is we focus on the outer rings of this circle. We help customers adopt cloud services quicker than they can on their own by enabling compliance from the ground up. And that allows you to more quickly start consuming cloud services or thinking about which new services you can use, or even if you're just starting out your cloud journey, just getting your feet wet and trying to understand how can I take advantage of the cloud. We use automation to strictly drive compliance on top of the cloud. Using a defined set of rules, we automatically evaluate and in some cases remediate any pieces of the cloud that are considered not compliant. And that helps, going back to that accelerate component, it allows you to more quickly adopt those services, knowing that when you bring services online or start consuming these public cloud services, those services themselves are always going to be compliant. And that's proved or demonstrated through our Comply platform. It allows you to generate audit-ready data so that you can prove to your stakeholders or your customers that you are compliant on the cloud and how you're doing so. And I'll walk you through what that looks like. Now, all of those pieces that ClearDATA takes as part of the cloud journey allows you to focus on the center, focus on the innovation. By removing some of the heavy lifting and some of the complexities of compliance in the cloud, ClearDATA allows you to focus on innovating your application and your workload and focusing on what's important to you. The ClearDATA platform is comprised of two products on top of a foundation that we built out for shared resources, billing and usage reports, how you interact with ClearDATA support. We also have, we have the ClearDATA Comply platform, which I'll be focusing on today. That is our compliance and automation platform on top of the public cloud vendors. We also have a product family called Locate that is more driven towards healthcare data and how we can use emerging technologies like machine learning to help healthcare organizations better track and manage their healthcare data. All of these are available with healthcare managed services. In our world, managed services is a component of people that help you adopt the cloud and help you ensure those ongoing compliance. So if you need help with that cloud journey, you can engage with our managed services support team to help more quickly get on board, as well as just for help with anything that happens along the way. And then we have a professional services organization that is above and beyond anything else. If you need help with migrations or DevOps transformations, we can help you with that as well. Now, this image gives you a really good representation of how ClearDATA provides value into the cloud. We take the healthcare standards on the left, such as HIPAA, or again, GDPR, ISO, and we build out the requirements from that. So in the world of HIPAA, there are CFRs, or Code of Federal Regulations, and those are the rules that healthcare organizations have to follow. For example, you have to ensure that your data is encrypted when it's at rest, encrypted on storage. Now, what we do is we take those interpretive rules and we build them into technical controls that are strict controls that we map then to the cloud service. So the center of this image shows the join of a healthcare standard mapped to a technical control of a cloud service. So if you think of an Amazon storage service, we have to ensure that the encryption is properly set for any storage that may contain PHI, and that's part of our automated platform. Anytime a storage bucket is created or modified, we evaluate that and, if necessary, remediate it to ensure not only the initial compliance, but ongoing compliance as well. And we do that across a large number of services and a large number of clouds. Now, we've created a cloud platform on top of the clouds that helps customers by, depending on their job function or what they need out of the cloud. If we look at the left, your application developers, your system admins, they are going to gain native access to the cloud. ClearDATA does not have a middleware. There's no ClearDATA portal to go access the cloud services. One of the more important things is ClearDATA provides native access to the cloud, so your organization can use the services they're familiar with. And then folks like your CISO or your security officers will engage with the ClearDATA Comply platform and be able to generate and obtain the audit proof they need to showcase that compliance. The Comply platform, as I said, is available for Azure, AWS, and Google. And apologies for the formatting, but wanted to show that we have dozens of services across all three clouds covered. These are services that have automated technical controls. So for example, in the Amazon world, we have 21 services covered and 58 technical controls covering those 21 services. That's 58 technical controls mapped back to specific healthcare regulations across multiple standards that ensure the ongoing compliance in that cloud. And with the Comply platform, there's two options. One is you can look at a software-only package where you gain visibility into the cloud and the same evaluation or remediation actions that I'll demonstrate in just a minute. And you can also purchase the healthcare managed services on top of that. So again, if you need some assistance with adopting the cloud or accelerating your journey, but with additional help of folks who are more experienced in the cloud, we can offer that as well. So we have options for wherever you may be on that journey. And now I'll show you a demo of what that looks like. And while I'm sharing my screen, I did see a question in the chat of the list of AWS services that are covered. And yes, we will reach out to you and we can get you in touch and get you that list. All right. What we're looking at now is the ClearDATA Comply portal. This is where you interact with the ClearDATA compliance dashboard and framework that would allow you to do that demonstration. And conversely, I'm also logged into the Amazon console. So for folks that are interested or experienced in Amazon, this is exactly how the normal Amazon cloud consumption would happen. You would log into the console or use the API and access your services. Now the foundation is going, the ClearDATA portal is going to showcase exactly what's been happening in the accounts. So as an example, what I'll do is show you that I created an S3 bucket here just prior to the webinar, and when I created the bucket, I chose the default settings. So for example, encryption was not enabled, access logging was not enabled. And I'll show you what that looks like when I go through it. So if I create a bucket, when I go through and create defaults, versioning is not enabled, and logging is not enabled, and encryption is not enabled. And those are three very core tenets of really any service or storage or anything that's going to host or process PHI. And if I create a bucket in this manner, we're going to deem this to be non-compliant because it's not going to have those features turned on. So if I look at the properties, you can see that the only thing that got enabled was object level logging. Now I did the same for the bucket here. And what happened is our system on the back end had detected the bucket was created. It detected that it was non-compliant, and then it remediated it. And in this case, it turned on versioning, access logging, and encryption. And now I can see that in the foundation. So if I look here and I look at remediations, this gives me a list of the remediated services or systems that were deemed non-compliant when they came online or were changed, and then we modified. In this case, it is an S3 bucket that did not have encryption turned on. It didn't have access logging. So if we look at all of these, you can see some of the, right here, the webinar bucket that I created earlier today was then remediated, and all of these settings were then enabled. Now, if I were to go in and modify this, for example, turn off encryption, the same thing would happen. The system would detect the change, and then it would go evaluate it, determine it's not compliant, and then remediate it. Now, in the world of S3 and some other services, the remediation actions depend on the service themselves. In the world of S3, we change these on the fly. There's no impact to the bucket itself. However, not all services are like that. On every public cloud vendor, there are services where you cannot make certain settings changes after they are provisioned. So in this example, I'm going to use what's called the Amazon EFS, or Elastic File System, which is a shared file system service. And I am not going to select enabling encryption at rest. Now, in EFS, you're not allowed to enable encryption after the file system is created. There's a number of services across all three vendors that fall into the same category. And rather than allowing a non-compliant storage to be created or a system, what we do is we do not allow these to actually come online. So you can see this is already set to deleting. Rather than having a non-compliant system be available and for some time potentially store sensitive data, and then it would have to be a destructive action after data has already been stored on it, we simply don't allow it to come online. And we send an alert, which you can subscribe to email depending on the cloud. For example, in Amazon, you have an SMS topic. And then we raise that up inside the Foundation portal. So if I were to refresh this page, you can see that we had an EFS volume that was already deleted, and that data, that alert and action will be shown here. That way, your developers or DevOps or administrators, whoever is provisioning, can determine why something happened. So for example, EFS file system encryption. So the file system was remediated because it didn't have encryption. And we provide documentation to our customers that showcase exactly what the expected behavior is on every service in every public cloud. It is, here are the settings that you should enable, and if you don't, here's the remediation action. Now, the other thing that you can get out of the ClearDATA ClearDATA Comply is a list of alerts as well as a compliance score. We can provide alerts which are anything we detect that goes against certain best practices. Think of them as evaluations that occurred, but we did not remediate. So for example, best practices around user management, in some cases unauthorized calls, we raise those as alerts. We can also provide a quick review of what your compliance score is, broken down by service category, as well as the number of evaluations in the last 24 hours. So in this demo account, you can see there's a high number of resources, so a high number of evaluations occur. There's a lot of changes. And we can also see the score here broken down by compute, storage, and database. Now, one other thing we can do is demonstrate all of that. So I talked a lot about you have the ability to accelerate, and there's evaluations and remediations. And this is a way that you can prove that to your stakeholders. You can go take a snapshot report of what your compliance, your environment's compliance is at any given time. So for example, this is a daily summary of the overall compliance of my cloud environment. And it will say exactly what the percentage compliance is for each individual service, as well as an overall compliance score. And then you can take that data and give it to the people that need to see it, that's important. So think of leadership or possibly auditors or stakeholders. And probably most importantly is going to be your customers as well. So you can go to your customer, or if you're trying to win new customers, you can say, here's how I am compliant in the cloud. We'll give this a second to come up. So for some reason that is not running, so I'll show you an example of what that looks like here. So this is an example report where we have all of the systems from EKS, or the Kubernetes service, including Kinesis, and exactly their status here. So we can see which ones are not compliant. And then we can also run details reports. So I could look at, for example, underneath EC2, why is my intrusion detection 33% compliant? Which of my EC2 instances are not passing this check? And then we can look at how do we remediate those and what does that action look like. Now, the other important thing is, this is, like I said, this is a snapshot in time. So this gives you a sample report of 1 day's worth. But what's really more important to showcase to folks is what you probably want to think of as a trend report. And this gives you a 30-day snapshot of what does a trend look like. So if we think about what I like to call building a culture of compliance, as you start adopting the cloud, it's very important that you showcase, again, to those important stakeholders and those customers that here's how I am being compliant in the cloud. Here's what I'm focused on. It's things, here's my controls that map to my healthcare standards. Here's how I am compliant, and here's proof of that compliance. So we can showcase an overall compliance score over the last 30 days, as well as broken down again by compute, storage, database, exactly what this looks like over time, and then detailed of exactly which of these checks. So this maps directly back to the summary report I showed, but this gives you an example of all of these over time. So for example, the intrusion detection is kind of up-down, but this is a good example of building, how this translates to a culture of compliance. You want to be monitoring these pieces as they map to healthcare controls so that you, when the OCR comes or your auditors come in, or when you're speaking to your customers, you can go and tell them, here's how we're monitoring for compliance. Yes, my intrusion detection went down because these are systems, and systems can fail, an agent can stop, something can happen, but I'm responding accordingly. I am addressing this because I see the drop, and then I can prove that there was a corresponding increase. So in this example, there was an issue on the 17th. We addressed it and fixed it, and then brought it back up, in this case, to baseline. But we can look at this across other systems. So you can prove that when there's a drop in compliance, you're aware of it and you address it. And that helps build, quote unquote, culture of compliance, which is really important, especially when there's a potential incident or when you're working with federal regulators or auditors. They look for that culture of compliance to prove that you are doing what you say you're doing. Now, how do you take that data and make it meaningful for the people you want to talk to, right? You're able to prove that you are compliant, but what does that compliance mean in the cloud? Well, we give you that information underneath what we call automated safeguards. An automated safeguard is a technical control that maps a healthcare standard to a cloud service. And here's a list of all of our automated safeguards and what they apply to. For the example, I'll look at audit logging. And what we've done here is we show the standards that this particular safeguard maps to. In this case, we'll say HIPAA. We also have GDPR, ISO, and NIST. And we have the exact language of the CFR that it applies to. Next to that, we have our interpretation. This is where it becomes really powerful because you don't have to think of the CFRs or the standards or the statutes in GDPR, and you don't have to build your own interpretations. You can look to ClearDATA to take away that heavy lifting, and you can then say, here is how I am enabling audit logging for all of these services. If we look across the top here, these are all the AWS services that the audit logging safeguard applies to. If I click the Azure logo, this is all the Azure services that this applies to. And in the next few weeks, we'll have Google in here as well, so that all of these safeguards can map to all of these services. And that list goes all the way down. So we think about encryption. Where does encryption apply for Amazon? Where does encryption apply for Azure? And this is really powerful because it can say, here's all the CFRs that I'm meeting. Here's all my interpretations. Here's exactly how I'm solving for that compliance. Now you can look at it by this view, or you can select a particular cloud service if you want to look at, for example, Azure Data Factory. You can see it has the audit logging standard. Or if I want to look at Azure Databricks, we have a public access. So this gives a really quick way to narrow things down either by AWS or Azure and which ones are important and what services they map to. And now the one thing I would like to show you is going back to that S3 example before where we changed the bucket. If I refresh the page, you can see default encryption has re-enabled. And if I go back to remediations, you would see a second remediation occur on that webinar bucket. Now, again, that goes back to that culture of compliance and that trends of long-term ongoing compliance. It's relatively easier to build an initial compliant environment by ensuring those boxes are checked when you deploy. But what happens if someone makes a change? How do you know that everything stays compliant? And that's where Comply can help you build that long-term ongoing compliance and ensuring that it's always ready to host and process PHI. So with that, I'll end the screen share. If there are any other questions, please feel free to ask. I'll stay around for another couple of minutes. If not, I thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you attending the webinar.